Every single month, I get oysters sent to my door because I have an oyster subscription that sends me different varieties of oysters straight to my door so I can try them out. And this month, I want to show you what I got in my box. So this comes cold shipped to you overnight, and because they're so quick on shipping it to you, these ice packs are still cold when you get them. Now I got 3 different varieties of oysters, and I got 10 oysters of each variety. So the first one is going to be a black magic oyster, and it's from Thunder Cove, Prince Edward Island in Canada. I honestly love PEI oysters. I think they're some of the best in the world. Next is Moonlight Bay, which is from Barnstable, Massachusetts. These ones look pretty good because they were a good size, and I was excited to try those ones out. And other ones I've had from Massachusetts were good as well. And the last one were these 3 island ones from Beals, Maine. And I've had these ones before, and I like them especially because of their size too. Now, the very first oyster that I'm going to try is actually going to be one of the ones of the 3 islands oysters from Beals, Maine. Now, all 3 of these are farm-raised oysters, and one of the neat things about farm-raised oysters is they're pretty uniform in size and shape. That makes it a lot easier to like serve them raw and stuff like that because you know exactly what you're going to get. Also, sometimes when you get a farm-raised oysters, they grow so quickly that the edges become brittle, so you got to kind of be careful when you're shucking them not to get a bunch of shell inside your oyster. Now, I took a few out just for size comparison, and this was the smallest one, but all the rest were right around the same size, and I decided I was going to shuck the bigger one because honestly, I do like a bigger oyster. And as you could tell, these actually shucked pretty easily, but they weren't really plump on the inside. You could see the oyster is a lot smaller than the shell itself. I gave them a taste though, and I do love these 3
That's a good
island
start.
oysters. They taste good because they have a good amount of salt, and that oyster is a little bit sweet, but there wasn't a ton of umami. Next up is going to be the black magic oysters. And like I said, oysters from Prince Edward Island are some of my favorite, but there is one thing that I wasn't too sure about when I looked at these oysters.
Now look, these ones are much smaller. Look at the difference between the 3 islands and the black magic. You can see just how much smaller they are. Now, I do like an oyster that's this size compared to this size. I'm going to take the biggest one that I pulled out and I'm going to try it like that.
And if you're curious, this is actually coming from the Real Oyster Cult. I do have a promo code, but it's in my Patreon. So my Patreon is now a place where you're going to find lots of seafood discounts from different online retailers to make it a little more affordable for you guys to afford to buy some seafood. Right now, the Patreon is $4 a month, and what it gets you is basically access to all those discount codes that are going to save you a bunch of money on seafood that you're going to buy and have delivered to your home. Also, joining the Patreon is going to get you in touch with a lot of like-minded seafood enthusiasts like yourself, and you'll be able to communicate with me a lot easier through the community chat as well. If you want to join, that's great. If you're not interested, then just enjoy the rest of the video.
That's pretty good too.
And last but not least, here's the final oyster I got in my subscription.
And again, these are kind of on the smaller side. Now, the thing I noticed about these ones is not only are they on the smaller side, but you can see for whatever reason, some of them are kind of like turned upside down. So if you look on the shells there, you can see how those points or those hinges are turned kind of downward, and that makes them harder to shuck. So what I find when that happens is you turn it upside down and shuck it like this to get it started, pop it open, and then you're able to do it. But for this one, I'm going to try opening just one of the regular ones here. And this is kind of the standard size right here. It's not too big, a little bit bigger than the Black Magics. But again, not nearly as big as the 3 Island. Like, this is a much bigger and I think better size oyster. And you can see it's a little bit bigger than the Black Magic itself. You know, it's all kind of personal preference, but I do like that a little bit better. Okay, So again, the easiest way to do this, you don't want to put a lot of force in. First of all, what you want to do is you want to have it so the knife is going down towards the board. A lot of people say I'm going to stab my hand. I never hold it like this because it will go towards my hand. I know I'm not the best shucker, but I just have done this way so many times now. It's what I feel comfortable with. And so if you look, the knife is pointed down here. Here's the meat of my hand, and I'm just trying to get the tip of that oyster knife in there. And then after it's in there just a little bit, that's when you're kind of turning it like key and it pops it. Now after that, all you're doing is basically just almost wedging that knife a little bit in there. And if you go too far, it's going to rip part of the oyster. So after you get it wedged a little bit, you're going to start scraping your knife at the very top. Now, there are so many people that are better at oyster shucking than me, but this is the way that I've found works the best for me. And a lot of the times you get a nice, clean oyster. Like that's actually a pretty good shuck right there. And I'm kind of surprised. This is actually the best looking inside oyster. If you look, you can see how kind of full and plump the oyster looks. Also, it's got a really nice coloring to it. Delicious. Like that was the best one out of all of them. That was really good. So that's my month subscription for them. And if I'm ranking them, I guess what I'd probably say would be, I would say, in my opinion, probably Moonlight Bay overall was my favorite. So Moonlight Bay was my favorite, then the Main, and Black Magic.